content for you is everything for your audience, stop writing a personal journal. That's not how algorithms work.
Today on Strategy Shorts, I'm joined by none other than Daniel Murray. He's the founder of the Marketing Millennials. You've probably seen their content on LinkedIn. To date, they've got over 750,000 followers. Daniel, thank you so much for taking the time. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
This podcast, Strategy Shorts, is designed to be short, succinct, and practical. We want to give people little advantages, things that they can take away and try. And I know that you've been thinking about something to bring to the audience today, but before we go further with that, I'd love to hear a little bit more about you, your background, and how the Marketing Millennials came to be.
Yeah, it was a very unplanned. I wish it was a better story, but I was in marketing operations. I wanted to test LinkedIn as a platform. And so I started posting 2019, just marketing content just to see if it had organic reach or not. And this was just actually testing for the company I was working for, not for myself. And then I saw I had 1,500 connections, followers, and I was getting 3,000, 4,000 impressions. I was like, oh, this platform is actually great. And then I was running out of content ideas. So I decided I wanted to start a podcast, and that was the Marketing Millennials. And really, the idea was just to create more content on LinkedIn, speak to marketers I didn't have access to before. And then it turned into creating a LinkedIn page to repurpose the content and get new guests for the content. I told my wife, I was like, oh, if I get 10,000 followers on this page by the end of the year, this will be great. And it ended up getting like 250,000 followers, and it exploded in a year. So it was just a bunch of trial and error. Once I seen there's an audience for fun, quick, simple marketing advice, that's how the Marketing Millennials has grown.
What was the niche, do you think? Like, what was it about the way you positioned the content that you think spoke to people? Because that growth really is phenomenal. And obviously, there are lots of marketing channels out there. There are lots of people talking about marketing. What you were launching was nothing new in one sense. So what was it about the way that you approached it that you think really got that early traction?
One was hyping up other people, not myself. So at the first, I would hype up marketers and their content and their cool, simple ideas. Second is humor. I think LinkedIn was always a place that didn't have that much humor. So I wanted to have a break in the LinkedIn feed that nobody was having at the time. You see these pages on Instagram, you see these pages on other channels, but LinkedIn didn't really have memes going on or short content. So I started posting screenshots of tweets, and then it turned into screenshot of tweets and memes. And people seem to want that type of content and crave it because LinkedIn was a bunch of written long form videos, hard to digest. So I wanted to it was more of a break in the LinkedIn feed for fun, easy to digest content.
I remember looking at some of your content on LinkedIn when I was launching my first podcast a few years ago. It only ran for a couple of seasons in the end, but it was about marketing. It was short format. It was, again, about practical advice and tips. But the kind of the brevity of what you were doing, I found it really inspiring at the time. So it's great that a few years later, we're getting to have this conversation. Now, it's funny because you've already given us some really top tips right there, some really practical advice. But I know that you've been thinking about the audience that you want to speak to today, and you've got something like a framework or a top tip to share with us. So before you talk through what that is, who's the kind of audience that you're speaking to with this framework? Who do you think will really benefit from getting this information?
For my audience, I would say it's millennial marketers who are trying to have fun and who love marketing. I think that's my audience. But I think any company who is trying to run social, and especially B2B companies, I think there's always practical advice for that, because I think B2B companies inherently just don't, most of them don't have fun or great social presence. They rely on it more being a ticker for like what they are doing. Like, oh, we launched this, we have new jobs, we have a webinar coming up. And the goal of social is to be social with the audience. I mean, if you just want to be a landing page, so if someone lands on there, you can put as much of stuff for you as you want. But if you want to be the go-to place in the industry for information on social media, you have to give the audience what they want. So I think people who are trying to run LinkedIn well, social well, and then also just the marketers who are having fun, want practical advice, want to sharpen their craft.
Yeah, there's so much stuff, isn't there, on LinkedIn? You were just referencing there about, come to our webinar, listen to our thing, join our workshop. Lots of brands still just can't break free from framing the thing they're talking about as, I want you to engage in my thing. I want you to come to my webinar. I want you to come to my activity. I want you to download this lead magnet, rather than, I want you to feel informed and encouraged and engaged. And I guess that's what, one of the things that you've been doing so well is really putting that value first. And then people come to you, I guess, and they want to talk to you about projects and consulting opportunities. But it's because you've built that valuable relationship, right?
Yeah, I think it's when you go out and set content that is everything for the audience, it makes it easy for the audience to build relationship with you and trust you. The way I think about content in general is I think you got to separate your product and think of content as the product that you're trying to market. And when you think of content as a product, you innovate on it, you market to it, and the main thing is you do everything to make that product great for the audience. The problem with a lot of companies is content is just a a support channel to help everything else. And the problem with that is if you consider it a support channel, you use it in bad ways when you need to hit revenue numbers, when you need to send out that email. You use content in the wrong way. But once you build trust with your audience will do a lot for you. They'll jump through hoops for you. But you have to build that foundation of building great content.
Framing your content not as the window to the product, but framing it as the product itself, I think is a really interesting insight. So could you take us through that a little bit more, and how that becomes practical for our listeners?
Yeah. So the way you have to think about it is first deeply go and understand who your audience is. I know that's a simple advice, but a lot of people don't do it. And the way you do that is go hang out on channels where your audience hangs out. Not only that, consume a lot of content that your audience puts out there. Go hang out in communities. So the first thing is deeply understand your audience. And I think one of the best things to do is test things out on social that has high organic reach. So LinkedIn is a great place for that. TikTok's a great place for that. YouTube Shorts. An insight that I heard from Mr. Beast, but it's very true. I've never simplified it like this, but the algorithm is the audience, whether you like it or not. And what that means is that LinkedIn wants your content to be shown to more people who will like your content. Like they want people to stay on the platform, so they're showing them content that they will like. So if you testing out content on social, you will inherently start seeing what people like and what people don't like. And if people aren't liking your posts, it's probably either one, too niche, or two, your audience isn't liking that type of content. So the first thing is doing like market research of how a product is going to market. And then the second thing is you have to have some, I like to say, like hill that you would die on, or something that separates you, that a strong opinion that you're going to write about, that you can repeat over and over so people know who you are, know what you stand for, know your why. I like to start that. And then you can have pillar content of like, I'm going to talk about these few topics. And that helps you like distill what type of topics. And those could change over time based on how you're seeing your content perform in the market. I like to think of when you start out, you should have one high organic reach channel. So a channel that you can get a lot of attention. And this is for organic specifically. Have a high reach channel like LinkedIn or YouTube Shorts. And secondary, you have a middle funnel channel where you can start capturing people, newsletter, website, subscription, because the number one goal in marketing for anybody is to get attention. I don't care who you are, you have to get your person attention first, otherwise you lose in marketing. Once you've gotten attention, you need to start moving people to your own channels because you need to have a place to share your content. So the way I think about my content is social is what I like to call like a sampler or a like appetizer for like my longer form content, which is podcast and newsletter. And then you can start moving down the funnel once they're in the podcast, newsletter, things like that. You can go down the funnel even more and do events. You could do courses, virtual events, whatever you want to do. And the last thing is the product you're trying to sell. So you're trying to move people from attention to intention. And the way to get into intention is to give people what they like. Find out what your product is, which is your content. Pick where you're going to distribute that product. Find the channels where people actually hang out. And then once you figure that part out, you can now consistently be on those channels. I think the problem is that people aren't consistent on those channels and they just give up after 3 weeks or they stop posting. But showing up consistently is what people respect. To make great content, I should add, is your content should fit into a bucket. It should either entertain, it should either educate, it should either inspire people, it should engage. And another thing for B2B especially is have expertise. And this is where like a creator comes into play or someone in your company. Once you have that down, you will be miles ahead of your competitors if you treat content this way. That's how I think about it. And it's a mindset that you need to adopt in a company to start creating content this way.
So Daniel, that's all really, really interesting. And obviously there's loads of value in what you've just talked us through. Thinking about your social channels as an appetizer, as a way to kind of like first engage your audience. And the other thing you were touching on is that lots of people engaging on LinkedIn will often, they'll put out a webinar or they'll put out a piece of content and they'll think, well, no one's joining my thing. But actually what they're doing is a bottom of funnel task. And then they're wondering why people aren't really interested. And it's actually because you're offering it to them too soon. They haven't got to know you yet. But if you were going to kind of hone in and zoom in on one particular takeaway or where you want people hearing what you've been talking through today to focus first, what would be that one piece of advice, that one practical thing that they need to take away and try?
I think shifting your mindset that content for you is everything for your audience. Stop writing a personal journal. That's not how algorithms work. If you want a personal journal, you can write that, but you're just not going to you might get interest, or you might not, but you should write things that are everything for your audience. And knowing your audience deeply comes from consuming a lot of content. Great content comes from consuming great content.
Daniel, thank you so much for taking some time out of your schedule for Strategy Shorts. I really, really appreciate it. And I hope we can speak again soon.
Thank you for having me.